Hello guys, welcome back to Audible Odyssey. So let's step into a world of immersive storytelling where gripping tales of mystery, horror and adventure come to life. Each narration is crafted to pull you into the heart of the story, creating an unforgettable audio experience. From spine-tingling horrors to timeless classics, Audible Odyssey Adventures is your gateway to thrilling journeys beyond imagination. Subscribe now, and let the stories take you to places you've never dreamed of. Audible Odyssey presents. I'm not drunk. I only had a few drinks to calm myself and steady my nerves, so I could tell you the whole story without the liquid courage. I'm pretty sure I couldn't get through the more abominable parts of what happened. You must think me crazy telling you all of this. I thought the old man was insane too when he told me. At first I should have listened to him, but of course I didn't, and now it's too late. He's dead. I am not. I wish I could celebrate this fact, but I know that I too won't be alive for much longer. After you hear my story, you'll know why the thought of rain sends chills down my spine and makes my heart pound in my chest. I was working with a non-profit organization in Nicaragua in the city of Estella. I worked in a clinic with other local doctors. My job was to organize the patients and provide treatment that might otherwise be overlooked. The local doctors had the training to diagnose and treat injuries, but they were woefully uneducated about mental illness and coping with trauma. I worked in a clinic in Estella for 1 year without problems. I earned a name for myself by handling the mental cases that the doctors saw as being beneath their expertise. It was in one of these cases during early May that I first met the old man who lived a few miles outside of the city in a rural community. His daughter literally had to drag him into the clinic by the hand because of his guilt about seeking help. The doctor spent 5 minutes with him before referring him to me. I sent his daughter out of the room so I could talk with him and see if I couldn't find out what the problem was. Of course, he saw little reason to tell me the truth. The only thing I managed to learn was he was anxious about something before he clammed up and left the counseling room. I figured that I couldn't force him to tell me and went on my work. I didn't give much thought to it until one of his friends visited me. A week later, my Spanish wasn't perfect, but I managed to learn from his friend that the old man hadn't been sleeping and wasn't able to prepare the land for planting in the rainy season, which was only a week or two away. This was something serious, as most farmers will work on their land until the day they die at their friend's behest. I went to the community to visit an old man. I followed his friend there on a beat-up school bus that had been repurposed as a transit option. I spent an hour crammed against other commuters that stared at me relentlessly as we slowly made our way through the hills. We arrived just before lunch and began the hike up to his house. During the winter, some farmers live up in the mountains so they can be close to their crops and protect them. The old man had a shack up in the mountains. He was surprised by my visit, but his friend helped to smooth over the awkwardness of the situation, and while he calmed him down, I observed his eyes were bloodshot and he had bags under his eyes like he hadn't been able to sleep. He seemed agitated as well, but I wasn't sure if that was because I was here or if it was something else entirely. His friend left me with him to talk and find out what was. The man was quiet at first, but eventually he began his story when it became clear that I wasn't going to leave. He told me that 10 days ago was the first rain. I remember the rain that pelted my apartment roof in Estella viciously for a few hours before receding before the rainy season begins at midday. Sometimes there are quick downpours that last only minutes. He'd been preparing his house up in the mountains. When the rain came, he decided to wait it out before heading down into the community. It lasted longer than he'd hoped, and he found himself sitting under his roof watching the sun sink behind the mountains. It was there that he became acutely aware that he wasn't alone. He told me he could have sworn he felt something watching him. He thought it had been other farmers that had been caught in the rain like him. They didn't respond to his call, but he said that sometimes men are hesitant to be caught on other people's property. When the rain died, he grabbed his machete and went down the mountain. He didn't expect anything more to happen were it not for his dreams. He told me that a day later, he dreamed he was in the woods. He could see the trees around him and the rain falling off the leaves and cooling the air around him. The woods were dark, but he wasn't afraid. He said it wasn't until he woke up that he realized that this dream was different from the others. He whispered that in his dreams he was usually in third person, but in this dream he was looking around the forest in first person. He told his daughter of his experience, and she, being superstitious, took him into the clinic, thinking it to be the work of a witch. I sympathized with him, knowing that holding local beliefs and superstition somehow brought out the ridicule of others who considered the myths to be tales only for country bumpkins. He noted that the dreams of being in the woods didn't stop. In fact, they became more frequent as winter approached. He dreamed of moving through the woods stalking something. He noted that he only had these dreams when it was raining. He whispered that there was something about the way he moved that unsettled him. His gait was more like a lumbering plot. The dream culminated a few days ago when he came across a pig in his nightly fay. He watched as the pig squealed when he brought his big meaty fist down on its head. He said in terror that the fist was almost as big as its head and it reduced the skull to a pulp similar to a rotten watermelon. He confided that he now knew it wasn't him in the dream but something else. It was something that was hunting in the forest. Whatever it was had killed the pig in a single blow with a heavy, suit fist. He said he hadn't been able to sleep after that dream. He was afraid of what he'd see next. I told him the only thing I could think of was that his dreams were just dreams. I didn't take him seriously but decided to leave the clinic number with him in case the dreams got worse. I could tell he was disappointed that I didn't believe him, but I'd thought who could believe a story like that? You'd have to be insane to take dreams for reality. Right now I can tell you that you don't believe me. I'm not angry. Seriously, I'm not, but I hope that by the end you'll understand that what I'm telling you is true. I hope to God that I won't share the fate of the old man, but I now think otherwise. I returned to work with a story to tell all of my co-workers. There's no such thing as doctor-patient confidentiality, and gossip reigns supreme. I thought nothing of the man's tale. It was something brought about after a night of binge drinking or horror movies. He was over-imaginative and nothing more. He'd probably never call and, eventually the dreams would go away. I continued with this line of thinking for a few days until one of the nurses told me that I had a message. It was, of course, from the old man. I went into the back room and played the message. After listening to it I played it again, then again. Each time my heart beat faster and my stomach dropped lower. This was as best as I could translate it. Forgive me if the translation seems a bit garbled. He wasn't necessarily talking clearly or concisely when he made the call. It went like this: I was dreamy again last night. Oh Christ blood, I looked through that thing's eyes again, that creature was out there in the woods. I saw what I saw my cabin. It was so close to me. It's hunting me. I don't know what to do. For God's sake, help me. I called the nurse to ask when the call was made. She informed me it was only a few days old. I played the message for her and she blanched. She realized the urgency of the message. I asked if she'd received any more calls from him, but she hadn't. I broke one of the rules of the clinic and used my cell phone to call the number. There was no answer. I called again and a third time, but met with the same results. He clearly needed medical or mental assistance. I felt like I was responsible for what happened. I thought he'd lost his marbles and was now too frightened to go outside because his dreams had gotten worse. I searched the pharmacy in the clinic and couldn't find what I needed, so I went to an outside source that I knew and picked up a few Valium. I decided I was going to go to the community and find the old man. I'd calm him down with some Valium and then convince him to seek some serious psychiatric help. What a fool I was. I arrived in the community at 10 o'clock in the morning and began to ask around for the old man's whereabouts. Most people's interest peaked when a man was visiting and, after a few misleading conversations in which I was directed to a young girl's house in a vain attempt to play matchmaker, I managed to run into his daughter. She recognized me from the clinic and asked me why I was visiting. I lied and said it was procedure to check up on people that come in and I needed to speak to him. She believed my story and told me he'd gone up to his house in the mountains to be closer to his crops so he could protect them from deer and less scrupulous farmers who would steal his beans and corn. She told me that he'd gone up into the mountains at the start of winter and wouldn't come down until harvest at 1 o'clock. I decided to go up to the old man's shack and try to help him. I did my best to remember the path I'd taken with his friend, but I must have gotten turned around somewhere because I arrived a few hours later, around 3 o'clock. The sky had gone from gray to black. Thunder roll are in the distance. I just wanted to find the old man and get him off the mountain and try to calm him down. With luck, we'd avoid most of the rain. I reached his house just as the first droplets began to fall. The door was open. I wasn't worried yet. It was common for people to leave their doors open in these parts. Most spend their time in front of their houses or in the back with their door open to welcome in guests. I called out to the old man but didn't get a response. I called louder and approached the small house. Something didn't feel right, but I turned away and thought the old man was probably in the woods nearby cutting wood to cook his dinner or something. I told myself this. As I approached the cabin, I stood in the doorway and it was there that I knew my gut instinct had been right. What little there was in the room had been scattered about like there had been a micro-hurricane localized inside. His wooden table had been flipped over and the plastic chairs had been hurled around the room. The hammock had been torn from the support beam and laid on the ground. The support beam was cracked and it looked like it could fall at any second. The room was sparse at best, but it looked like nothing was left untouched in the struggle. The most disturbing thing was the machete that was buried in the wooden wall. It took 3 pulls to remove it. It had gone deep and whoever had swung was definitely panicked about something I didn't have much experience of, but I knew that whoever had ravaged the house was dangerous and I didn't want to meet them without something in my hand. The sound of rain pounding the tin roof pulled my attention away from the disheveled room. I looked out of the door and saw the rain coming down in sheets. Winter was here and it had no intention of letting up. I could barely see a few feet in front of me. In the heavy downpour, I wouldn't be able to find the path back to the community. I'd be stuck up here until the rain passed. I passed the time looking around the one-room building. He'd used the hammock as a bed and there were a few stones on the floor with 2 metal pieces across the top and ashes beneath that he'd used as a makeshift stove. Like many of the houses in this community, it had dirt floors. On closer examination I found that the dirt had been clawed and displaced in spots. I followed the path as it started in the middle of the room and worked its way to the door. It was in the doorway that I found something that made me want to run, screaming into the night. In the doorway, buried in the wood, were 3 human nails. These nails had to belong to the old man. Something had come into his cabin and they struggled. In the process, they did all the damage that I surveyed. The old man had been knocked down and dragged through the door. He dug his nails into the doorpost in a vain attempt to keep himself grounded, but whoever was pulling him was too strong. He'd broken his fingernails on the door. I remember shouting, "Screw this," as I went out into the rain. There was no way I was going to stay in that small house a minute longer than necessary. The rain had lightened up and my visibility in the rain had drastically improved. I could now see about 100 feet in front of me through the pounding rain. I looked at the trail, which was now swamped with water. Rivers of rain poured down the mountain and washed downward. There was no way I'd be able to make it down the mountain without slipping and probably breaking my neck. I had to stay until the torrential downpour lessened. The rain continued as night fell. I killed time by toying with the machete. It was one of the types specifically designed for cutting firewood, but the curved top had snapped and it seemed more like a foot-long knife. I left the machete by the door and sat down in the hammock. I lost myself listening to the sound of rain pounding on the tin roof. I began to entertain the thought that I'd be stuck up in these mountains until morning. I wouldn't have any problem sleeping in the hammock, but I preferred my bed to a hammock, and my room took preference over a cabin in which an old man was out by force. I got out of the hammock for the 5th time to look out at the rain and see if my streak of bad luck would end anytime soon. It only got worse. I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. I could have sworn I saw something in the shadows of the woods. It didn't move, but it didn't mix in with the uniformity of the trees. My breath caught in my throat as I began to entertain thoughts that the old man had been right all along. I stood frozen in the doorway watching the thing in the woods. As if breaking eye contact would cause it to move in the darkness. It just looked like a man standing in the woods. I couldn't even tell if he was facing towards me or away from me. A peal of lightning confirmed my worst fears. I caught only a glimpse of it, but a glimpse was all I needed to let out a scream. It was tall. It had to have been 8 foot tall. Its arms sank down to its knees and it was completely covered in matted hair. Its teeth were in something that looked to be between a grimace of pain and the knife-sliced smile of a sadistic man. The brief flash of light died, but that image will be burned into my memory until the day of my death. Coincidentally, I may not have to wait long until then. I stood paralyzed in the doorway. A thought occurred to me. As I stood there, I realized that if I made the slightest movement as if to run away, it would attack. I remained there watching it and it watching me as seconds passed like minutes and minutes passed like hours. The ACHE set in after a few minutes of remaining completely motionless, but I buried it and soldiered on the machete that was just inches away from my hand. I glanced at it, wondering if I could get it in my hand without attracting the eye of the beast. There was another peal of thunder, and when I looked back it was gone. I thought that seeing it was bad enough, but when it was gone I couldn't help but imagine it breathing down my neck, not knowing where it was, and times worse. I scanned the shadows in the downpour but could find no shadowy figure watching me. I knew it was still nearby and it was very focused on me, but I couldn't pinpoint its exact location. The sound of a stick breaking behind me alerted Ed to where it was. It was behind the house. Now how did it move so quickly? It stood still for minutes and then in the blink of an eye it was behind the house. I said a silent prayer to the God I had never acknowledged up until this point. I prayed that I'd leave this rundown shack alive. There was nothing else I could do but pray. There was only one door into the house. It was searching for other entrances. Another stick snapped a few feet to the left of the last one and I knew it was moving. It was circling around the front. I had to keep it out if I didn't want to suffer the same fate as the old man. I slammed the door shut and slid the bolt across. The bolt was held in by a few nails in the rotten wood. It wasn't the sturdiest of barricades. I could hear the creature breathing just inches away from the door. My heart was close to exploding out of my chest. The rain was weakening. I waited for it to try and enter the rundown shack, but the longer I waited with my breath dying in my chest, the more I realized it probably wasn't going to try. All of a sudden, a loud bang rang out. The creature struck the door and by sheer luck the door held. The impact sent waves of recoil energy resonating through my now bruised shoulder. One hinge popped out of the wood and the bolts bent, but luckily held fast. The rain was now just a patter on the roof. The creature gave a low inhuman groan and began to walk away. I couldn't figure out why, until I recalled the old man's words. He said he was only dreamy of the creature when it was raining. He only saw it in the first rain. The creature must have had some connection to it. Did they only hunt in the rain? I waited in the silence and listened to the sound of water dripping off the roof into the soaked ground. I decided there and then that I'd go down the mountain in the dark, because if the rain picked up again it would return to me. I fled into the dark night, tripping and falling, and didn't stop until I reached the village. I was taken in by a concerned villager, but no matter how hard he pressed the topic, he couldn't get me to talk. They said that they found a dent on the door bearing no mark of a human hand. He wanted to hear about how the old man was doing. But I knew to open up about that would break the floodgates open and it would drive me insane. I was awake the entire night and I caught the first bus into Estella in the morning. You're probably wondering why I'm so terrified. I escaped, and now it should only be a matter of avoiding the mountains. You know nothing. You wanted to learn why I got so panic-stricken at the first sign of dark clouds that night. As I listened to the rain, I drifted off. I was always unable to resist the sound of rain hitting a zinc roof. Oh God, the things I dream. I saw something moving through the woods. It grabbed the tree and I saw its hairy fingers wrap completely around the tree trunk. It scaled the tree with ease. The thick tree creaked under its weight but stayed upright. It crested the tree and looked out over its domain. There were woods all around it. The creature looked northward, and through its eyes I saw Stella. The creature dropped down to the ground and began to head in that direction. It was heading towards me. The old man was right. It was stalking him in his dreams. It was now stalking me. It would find me. Eventually, I could run, but it would always find me in the rain. It only moved in the rain. It wouldn't stop until it found me. You wanted to know why dark clouds make me tremble and the thought of rain sends waves of fear through me. It's because I know that the next rain will draw closer and closer to me, and today it looks like the heaviest rain yet. So guys, the video has ended now. If you like our stories and want to see more videos like this, please subscribe to Audible Odyssey channel and do all these things: like, comment, share, and subscribe. Enjoy horror and adventure stories like this. So just subscribe to Audible Odyssey. Bye bye.